Manhattan, New York City. October 2024. Fifth Avenue gleamed under the afternoon sun like a river of glass and steel, reflecting the ambitions of everyone who walked its legendary sidewalks. The intersection of 5th and 52nd Street bustled with the usual chaos of a Thursday afternoon. Tourists craned their necks at the towering buildings while locals navigated the crowds with practiced efficiency. Street vendors called out their wares, the smell of roasted nuts mixing with exhaust fumes and expensive perfume. It was the kind of day where 1,000 stories unfolded simultaneously, most of them destined to remain invisible, lost in the city's relentless current. On the northeast corner, hunched against the cold granite of a luxury building, sat a man the city had long ago stopped seeing. His clothes were layered and filthy, his beard matted and streaked with gray. His hands, scarred and weathered, clutched a crumpled photograph as if it were the only thing tethering him to existence. He didn't ask for money. He didn't hold a sign. He simply sat, silent and still, his eyes fixed on that photograph with an intensity that suggested he was looking through a window into another world. The people who passed him saw what they always saw, nothing. A fixture. Part of the urban landscape, as unremarkable as a mailbox or a fire hydrant. Their eyes slid over him with practiced indifference, that peculiar skill city dwellers develop to protect themselves from the overwhelming need that surrounds them. But destiny has a way of making itself known, of forcing the invisible into the light. The black SUV pulled up to the curb with the kind of precision that spoke of professional drivers and tight schedules. The door opened, and Victoria Chen emerged like she was stepping onto a stage. And in a way, she was. At 42, Victoria had become one of the most recognizable faces in American media. Her tech company, Neuralink Dynamics, had revolutionized social networking, making her a billionaire before she turned 35. Her face graced magazine covers monthly. Her TED Talk had been viewed 60 million times. She was beautiful in that calculated way that came from personal trainers, private chefs, and the finest cosmetic dermatologists money could buy. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and her heels clicked against the pavement with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. Two assistants flanked her, one speaking rapidly into a phone while the other scrolled through a tablet, updating Victoria on her afternoon schedule. The media crew had been tipped off about her arrival. This was a carefully orchestrated moment. Victoria was unveiling a new affordable housing initiative, a public relations move designed to soften her image after recent criticism about her company's labor practices. The cameras were already set up, and a small crowd had gathered, held back by velvet ropes and security personnel. Victoria paused at the building's entrance, turning toward the cameras with her professional smile, the one that had been perfected over thousands of interviews and public appearances. This was supposed to be a routine photo opportunity, another carefully curated moment in her carefully curated life. The homeless man looked up. It happened slowly at first. His head lifted, drawn by some inexplicable instinct, some frequency only he could hear. His eyes, which had been clouded with the vacant distance of someone lost in memory, suddenly focused with startling clarity. He stared at Victoria with an intensity that cut through the crowd like a knife. His mouth opened. No sound came out at first, just a trembling of lips that hadn't formed words in what might have been years. His hand, the one clutching the photograph, began to shake. Then he stood. The movement itself was remarkable. People who spend their days on the streets develop a kind of learned stillness, a way of making themselves small and unthreatening. But this man rose to his full height, which was considerable, and suddenly he was no longer invisible. He was 6 feet tall at least, his frame still broad despite obvious malnourishment. He took a step forward. One of Victoria's security guards noticed him immediately. The guard's hand went to his belt, his body tensing. But the homeless man wasn't moving aggressively. He was moving like someone in a dream, like someone compelled by forces beyond his control. He raised the photograph, his arm extending toward Victoria like an offering or an accusation. The word that came from his throat was barely recognizable as speech. It was raw, scraping, a sound dredged up from somewhere deep and buried. Tori. Victoria froze. The smile remained fixed on her face, but something changed behind her eyes. The cameras continued filming, capturing every micro-expression, every fleeting moment of what happened next. The man took another step, and now he was at the edge of the velvet rope barrier. Security moved to intercept him, but Victoria raised her hand. The gesture was small, barely perceptible, but it stopped them cold. Tori, the man said again, and this time the word was clearer. His voice cracked with disuse and emotion. It's me. The photograph in his hand was visible now to those close enough to see. It was worn nearly to transparency in places, the edges torn and stained. But the image was still discernible, a young couple, maybe in their early 20s, sitting on a beach somewhere. The woman had long dark hair and was laughing at the camera with unguarded joy. The man had his arm around her, looking at her rather than at the lens, his expression tender and undefended. One of the reporters, sensing something extraordinary unfolding, pushed closer with her camera. Others followed. The carefully controlled event was rapidly spiraling into something unscripted and raw. Victoria's face had gone pale. Beneath her makeup. She stared at the homeless man, and for just a moment, the mask of composed perfection slipped. Her hand moved unconsciously to her throat, fingers touching the delicate skin there as if checking for a pulse, as if making sure she was still real. "No," she whispered, but the microphones caught it. "That's not possible." The homeless man's face twisted with something between hope and anguish. Tears began streaming down his weathered cheeks, cutting clean tracks through the grime. "I never stopped looking for you," he said, his voice gaining strength. 20 years. I never stopped." The crowd had gone silent. Even the traffic seemed to hush, as if the city itself was holding its breath. People who had been walking past stopped, drawn by the magnetic pull of human drama. Phones appeared, recording from every angle. One of Victoria's assistants moved forward, her voice sharp with authority. "Sir, you need to step back. Security will remove you if you don't." His name was David, Victoria said suddenly, cutting through the assistant's words. Her voice was hollow, distant. "David Morrison. He died 20 years ago. In a car accident on the Pacific Coast Highway." The homeless man shook his head violently, desperately. "No. No, Tori. I didn't die. I survived. I survived, but when I woke up, you were gone. Everyone told me you'd moved on, that you didn't want to see me, that you'd already left California. I tried to find you, but I had nothing. No money, no phone, no way to reach you. And every time I tried, every time I got close, something happened. I lost jobs, I lost apartments, I lost everything. But I never lost this." He thrust the photograph forward again. "I never lost us." Victoria's breathing had become shallow. Her perfect composure was cracking, fractures appearing in the facade she'd built over 2 decades. "The hospital told me you died. They told me you died on the operating table. I sat there for 6 hours, and they came out and told me you were gone." "St. Catherine's Hospital in Santa Monica," David said, and now his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "I was there for 2 months. In a coma for 3 weeks. When I woke up, you weren't there. Your parents told me you'd left. They said you couldn't handle it, that you'd moved to New York to start over. They told me not to contact you." The color drained further from Victoria's face. Her hand clutched at her assistant's arm for support. "My parents told me you were dead. They made me identify a body. I went to your funeral, David. I stood at your grave." The words hung in the air like accusation and revelation combined. People in the crowd gasped. The reporters pressed closer, their cameras capturing every detail of this impossible scene. David swayed on his feet, the photograph trembling in his hands. "What?" An older woman in the crowd spoke up, her voice cutting through the tension. I remember this. I remember reading about it. She was fumbling with her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. 20 years ago. The Chen family. They were one of the richest families in California. Real estate empire. There was something about their daughter dating someone inappropriate, someone they didn't approve of. Victoria's head snapped toward the woman, her eyes wide with something like panic. But it was too late. The story was already unspooling, pulled by threads that had been waiting 2 decades to be tugged. Another voice from the crowd, this one male and younger. I've got something here. An old article from the Santa Monica Observer. About a hit-and-run on PCH. Victim was in critical condition, identity withheld pending family notification. That matches the time frame. David was staring at Victoria with dawning horror. They lied to both of us. Your parents. They told you I was dead, and they told me you'd abandoned me. They kept us apart. Victoria's knees seemed to give way. Her security caught her, holding her upright as she struggled to process what she was hearing. 20 years of her life, the foundation of everything she'd built, suddenly revealed as a structure raised on lies. I mourned you, she said, her voice breaking. I mourned you for years. I threw myself into my work because I couldn't stand to think about what I'd lost. Everything I built, everything I became, it was all because I thought you were gone. David took another step forward, close enough now that he could almost touch her if not for the barrier between them. And I spent 20 years trying to survive, trying to find my way back to something that made sense. I lost my mind for a while. Lost years I can't even remember. But I kept this photograph. I kept you. One of the reporters, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper instincts, was already on her phone, making calls. I need everything you can find on the Chen family, California, early 2000s. Especially around 2004. And I need information on any hospital records from St. Catherine's in Santa Monica, any deaths or critical patients around that time. Victoria's lead assistant was trying to regain control of the situation, her voice rising with panic. This is private property. We need to clear this area. Ms. Chen needs to know. Victoria's voice cut through like a blade. She straightened, shaking off the supporting hands. Her eyes never left David's face. Get my lawyers on the phone. Now. I want every record pulled from St. Catherine's Hospital from September through November 2004. I want depositions from every doctor and nurse who was on duty. And I want my parents on a call within the hour. She moved toward the barrier, toward David, her movements mechanical but determined. What happened to you? After you woke up, after they told you I was gone, what happened? David's face crumpled. I tried to rebuild. I got out of the hospital, but I had nothing. The car was totaled. I'd lost my job because I'd been gone so long. Your parents had made sure every door was closed to me. I couldn't get a reference. Couldn't get hired anywhere that knew my name. I thought maybe you really had left me, that maybe your parents were telling the truth and you'd decided I wasn't worth waiting for. I started drinking. Lost apartments. Lost friends. The slide down is faster than you'd think. One day you're a person, and the next day you're invisible. He gestured at himself, at his filthy clothes and broken appearance. This is what 20 years of survival looks like when you've been erased from the world. Victoria was crying now, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. She didn't seem to notice or care. I'm so sorry. God, David, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. I believe you, David said softly. Because I know you. I know the woman in this photograph. She wouldn't have walked away. She would have fought. A man in an expensive suit pushed through the crowd. He had the look of someone important, someone used to being listened to. Ms. Chen, I'm Harold Whitmore. I was an attorney for your father's firm back in the early 2000s. I'm retired now, but I need to speak with you immediately. Victoria turned to him, her face a mask of desperate hope. You know something. Whitmore nodded gravely. I know things I should have spoken up about years ago. Things I was paid to keep quiet about. But I won't be silent anymore. He glanced at David. Your father, Ms. Chen, he came to me in October of 2004. He wanted to know how to manufacture a death certificate. The words fell like stones into still water, ripples spreading outward. More gasps from the crowd. The cameras caught it all. He told me his daughter was involved with an unsuitable young man. Someone who would ruin her prospects, drag her down. He wanted to end the relationship permanently. I told him I wouldn't help with anything illegal, but he found someone who would. Someone who could make it look like there had been a death, complete with records and a body misidentified as this young man. Victoria made a sound like she'd been struck. Her assistant caught her again as she swayed. Whitmore continued, his voice heavy with old guilt. The man in the hospital, the real David Morrison, was listed under a false name. A John Doe. The hospital was told the family declined to claim him, that they wanted him moved to county care as soon as he was stable. By the time he woke up, the trail was cold. And Ms. Chen was shown a body, someone who died in an unrelated incident, someone whose family couldn't be found. The mortician was paid off. The death certificate was filed. It was thorough and cruel and completely illegal. Victoria's face had gone from pale to flushed with rage. My father did this. My father took 20 years from us. Your father and mother both, Whitmore said quietly. They believed they were protecting you. You were young, impressionable in their eyes. David here had no prospects, no family money, no connections. They saw him as a mistake you'd eventually thank them for correcting. David had sunk back down, his legs no longer able to support him. He sat heavily on the pavement, the photograph still clutched in his hands. 20 years, he whispered. We lost 20 years. The scene had transformed completely. What had begun as a controlled media event had become something wild and unpredictable. Police had arrived, drawn by the crowd and the commotion. Reporters from every major outlet were either present or being called. Social media was already exploding with videos and speculation. Victoria made a decision. She stepped over the velvet rope barrier, ignoring her security's protests. She knelt on the dirty sidewalk beside David, her expensive suit pressing into grime and old coffee stains. Up close, she could see the young man she'd loved beneath the ravages of 2 decades on the streets. His eyes, still that same startling blue. The shape of his jaw. The way his left eyebrow lifted slightly higher than his right. I see you, she said, her voice breaking. I see you, David. You're not invisible. Not to me. Never to me. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. Recognition deeper than memory, a soul remembering its other half. Tori. She took his hands, photograph and all, holding them between her own. I'm going to fix this. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to fix everything they broke. I'm going to give you back your life. I don't want my old life, David said. That's gone. I want a new one. But only if you're in it. The crowd had grown silent again, watching this intimate moment play out in public. There was something sacred in it, something that transcended the spectacle. Victoria's head of security approached cautiously. Ma'am, we need to move you to a secure location. This situation is getting out of control. She nodded without looking away from David. Get him medical attention. The best doctors, the best facilities. And get him somewhere safe and clean. A hotel. One of ours. The penthouse at the Mandarin Oriental. And get him clothes, toiletries, everything he needs. Ms. Chen, with respect, you don't know this man. He could be, he's David Morrison, Victoria said firmly. He's the man I loved 20 years ago, and he's the man I never stopped loving. Get him help. Now. As EMTs arrived to check on David, Victoria stood and faced the cameras. Her makeup was ruined, her suit was stained, and she had never looked more human, more real, than in that moment. "I'll make a statement," she said to the reporters. "But not today. Today, I need to deal with the fact that my entire adult life has been built on a lie. Today, I need to help someone who should never have been abandoned. And today, I need to call my parents and ask them how they could have done something so monstrous." She looked back at David, who was being helped to his feet by paramedics. 20 years ago, I thought I lost everything. Today, I found out I was lied to, manipulated, and robbed of the future I was supposed to have. But today, I also found out that some things survive even the cruelest circumstances. Some connections can't be severed, no matter how hard people try. One reporter, bolder than the others, called out, "Ms. Chen, what are you going to do now?" Victoria smiled, and it was the first genuine smile anyone had seen from her in years. "I'm going to remember who I was before I became what everyone else wanted me to be. And I'm going to see if it's possible to become who I was meant to be all along." The footage of what happened at 5th Avenue and 52nd Street went viral within hours. By evening, it was the top story on every news network. By the next morning, it had become a cultural phenomenon, spawning think pieces about class, family interference, and the invisible homeless population. Victoria's parents released a statement through their lawyers, declining to comment on specific allegations but expressing their love for their daughter and their hope that she would understand they had acted in what they believed were her best interests. The statement was coldly received by a public that had witnessed something raw and true play out in real time. David was admitted to a private medical facility for evaluation and treatment. He was malnourished, had several untreated medical conditions, and showed signs of post-traumatic stress. But he was alive, and he was no longer invisible. Victoria cancelled all her appointments for the following week. She spent her days at the medical facility, sitting with David, talking about what had been and what might be. They had to get to know each other again, to figure out who they had become in the years apart. It wasn't easy. 20 years had changed them both in fundamental ways. But the photograph, that crumpled photograph David had carried for 2 decades, sat on the table between them. A reminder of what had been real, what had survived everything designed to destroy it. 3 weeks after that day on 5th Avenue, Victoria held a press conference. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back simply. She wore minimal makeup. Her clothes were elegant but understated. "I've spent the last 20 years building an empire," she said to the assembled reporters. "I've accumulated wealth, power, and influence. I've been celebrated as a visionary and a leader. But I built it all on a foundation of grief and loss that turned out to be a lie. My parents, in what they believed was an act of protection, took from me the most important thing I had. They took my ability to choose my own path." She paused, gathering herself. "I'm announcing the formation of the Morrison Foundation, named for David Morrison, the man who spent 20 years living on the streets because my family decided he wasn't worthy of me. The foundation will focus on homeless services, mental health care, and advocacy for the vulnerable. It will operate with a budget of $2 billion to start, funded entirely from my personal wealth." Another pause. "I'm also stepping back from day-to-day operations at Neuralink Dynamics. I'll remain on the board, but I need time to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to run from grief. I need time to help someone who was hurt because of my family. And I need time to see if it's possible to rebuild something that should never have been broken." A reporter asked the question everyone wanted to know. "Are you and David Morrison getting back together?" Victoria's smile was soft and complicated. "That's not a story for public consumption. That's between us. What I will say is that destiny has a way of correcting course, even when powerful people try to redirect it. 20 years ago, we were torn apart by lies. Today, we have a chance to discover who we might have been, who we might still become." That's enough for now. In the months that followed, David slowly rebuilt himself. The medical care helped. The therapy helped more. Having a place to live, clean clothes, regular meals, all of these things that most people took for granted became the foundation of his recovery. But the hardest work was internal. He had to forgive himself for the lost years, for the choices made in desperation and despair. He had to learn to be a person again, not just a ghost haunting the edges of the city. Victoria was there through it all, not as a savior but as a companion. They took walks through Central Park, talking about everything and nothing. They had dinner at quiet restaurants where no one recognized them. They went to museums and movies and slowly, carefully, relearned each other. The photograph, now carefully preserved and framed, hung in David's apartment. He'd moved into a modest place in Brooklyn, refusing Victoria's offers of something grander. He needed to rebuild his sense of self on his own terms. "I spent 20 years with nothing but that photograph," he told her one evening as they sat on his small balcony, watching the sun set over the city. "It kept me human when everything else was trying to convince me I wasn't. But I don't want to live in the past. The photograph is important, but it's a memory, not a map." Victoria reached over and took his hand. "So what is the map? Where do we go from here?" David was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. I'm 42 years old, and I'm basically starting over. I'm taking classes, trying to figure out what I want to do with whatever time I have left. It's terrifying and liberating at the same time." "I know the feeling," Victoria said. "I stepped away from my company, and suddenly I had to figure out who I was without that identity. It turns out I'm not sure yet." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had been shaped by forces beyond their control, trying to reclaim their agency. A year after that day on Fifth Avenue, David enrolled in community college. He discovered a passion for social work, for helping others who were struggling with homelessness and mental health issues. He became a volunteer at several shelters, his own experience giving him credibility and insight that no textbook could provide. Victoria threw herself into the Morrison Foundation, learning the intricacies of nonprofit work and advocacy. She used her business acumen and connections to create real change, but more importantly, she learned to listen to the people she was trying to help. The foundation became known for its innovative approaches and its refusal to impose solutions from above. They dated, in a way. It was complicated and messy and nothing like what they'd had 20 years ago. They were different people now, carrying different scars. Some days were easy. Other days, the weight of what had been stolen from them felt crushing. But they kept trying. 2 years after that day, on a quiet evening in September, David and Victoria sat on a beach in California, not far from where the old photograph had been taken. They were older now, marked by time and circumstance. But they were together, and they were real. "Do you think we would have made it?" Victoria asked. "If your accident hadn't happened, if we just continued on the path we were on, do you think we would have lasted?" David considered the question seriously. "I don't know. We were so young. We probably would have had our hearts broken and moved on. But we would have had the choice. That's what they took from us. Not the guarantee of happiness, but the right to try and fail on our own terms." "And now?" Victoria asked. "Do you think we have a chance now?" David smiled, and it was the same smile from the old photograph, just weathered by time. "I think we have something better than a chance. We have knowledge. We've both been through hell. We know what it's like to lose everything. And we chose each other again, not out of nostalgia or obligation, but because we looked at who we actually are and decided we wanted to try." He pulled out something from his pocket. A small box. Victoria's breath caught. "I'm not proposing," David said quickly. "Not yet. We're not ready for that, and that's okay. But I wanted you to have this." He opened the box to reveal a simple silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a folded photograph. "It's a reminder. Not of what we lost, but of what we survived." And what we chose to build from the ruins. Victoria took the necklace with trembling hands. It's perfect. They sat together as the sun set over the Pacific, two people who had been torn apart by lies and brought back together by an impossible moment on a Manhattan street corner. Their story wasn't a fairy tale with a simple happy ending. It was messier than that, more real. But it was theirs. And in the end, that was the only destiny that mattered. The photograph that David had carried for 20 years, that crumpled piece of paper that had kept him human through the darkest times, had done its job. It had preserved something essential until the moment came to reclaim it. It had been a beacon, a promise, a refusal to accept the story others had written. Sometimes destiny is a straight line. Sometimes it's a circle that takes decades to close. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's a homeless man with a photograph, standing on a street corner, waiting for the universe to correct itself. The city moved on, as cities do. New stories emerged, new dramas played out. The intersection of 5th and 52nd Street returned to its normal chaos, tourists and locals flowing past each other in the eternal dance of urban life. But those who had been there that day never forgot. They had witnessed something rare, a moment when the invisible became visible, when the truth could no longer be hidden, when destiny reached down and set things right. And somewhere in Brooklyn, in a modest apartment with a small balcony, a carefully preserved photograph hung on the wall. Not as a memorial to what was lost, but as a testament to what survived. Because some loves are too strong to be killed by lies. Some destinies are too powerful to be denied. And some photographs carry more than memories. They carry hope.